Hello everyone. Welcome to June. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the books that I read in the month of May. So let's just hop right into it, shall we? Alright, so the first book I read was Deep Dark Fears by Fran Kraus, I believe it's pronounced. And I read this in like an hour. It's a graphic novel. There's like June bugs out, so if you hear some random like really loud things hitting my window, that's what they are. It's the June bugs. Basically what this book is an illustrated version of people's nightmares and fears that they have. Some of them are terrifying, others are extremely funny. I enjoyed reading this, would read it again. It's a very short read. It's a nice like coffee table book. The author, I believe, started this book by illustrating his own fears, and then he created a blog or like social media presence and asked people to submit their own fears, and that's what this book is. So it's a collection of both his fears and other people's. So yeah, definitely 5 out of 5 would recommend. The next book I read was A Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This book is written in sort of like a poetry type of fashion, which I don't normally like. However, I really liked this book. It's about a kid whose brother gets shot and he makes plans to shoot the guy who killed his brother. I'm pretty sure this kid is in his teens, if not the latest early 20s. I don't remember. I read this the same day I started it. I had very vivid imagery when I was reading it, which I really liked. I love books that like while you're reading them, it's basically like a movie playing in your head. That is the best for me. And that's exactly what this book did. Basically the whole story is Will, the main character, taking an elevator ride to get to the guy who killed his brother, and during this elevator ride he sort of gets revisited by a bunch of things from his past and like people he knows. I did give it a 4 out of 5 stars, I think, and that's only because I don't typically like the poetry sort of style of writing like a book, but like I said before, I still really like this book despite that. I had to finish it as soon as I started it. The next book I read was Travels with Charlie in Search of America by John Steinbeck. This book is about Steinbeck and a road trip he took with his dog during the 1960s. It is nonfiction. Ultimately, I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars, mostly because I don't typically like nonfiction. That's just who I am. I mostly only gave it 3 because there was quite a few times where I was just pretty bored while I was reading it. Personally, I love road trips and traveling and all that jazz, and this would be a fun book to read while on a road trip. And if you appreciate trips like that, it could be fun for you to read. I did enjoy his reading style, and I liked his commentary towards meeting other people and his open-mindedness. There were a couple valuable quotes and insights that I gathered from this book that I enjoyed a lot. I felt like overall the tone was sort of pessimistic, which I think is what bothered me more. It's not always a happy, fun time, and that's just life. That's how things are sometimes. Like I said before, I love road trips and I'm really passionate about traveling, and I want to someday make a book or a zine about traveling the US with like my photos and like commentary and things. And that's mostly one of the reasons why I read this book. And I guess I definitely learned a lot about what I want to make my book about while reading this. And while I was in the first half of reading this book, it definitely motivated me a lot to write my book of what I want to do. I did like the ending, and in the book it actually includes an alternate ending that Steinbeck wrote, but I do like the one that he chose better. Definitely glad that I read it. I do like some parts of the book, but I would not read the whole thing again, I don't think. If you're on a road trip and you enjoy reading and want something to read, I would probably recommend it for that, because it might get you in the mood. And I don't know, it's hard with things like this because it was pretty boring, but at the same time I am really glad that I read it. So, and not even just because I want to write a book like this of my own, even just appreciating the aesthetics of traveling and the people you meet and the cool things you see and blah blah blah. And it's also interesting the time that it was taken. it's interesting to hear about his insights with that as well. So I was very in between 3 and 4 stars with this one, but I ultimately went with 3. So the next book I read was 1984 by George Orwell. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. Glad I read it, and I sort of get the hype and why it's a classic. Personally, I wish I would have read it in high school because I think I would have been less exposed to other sort of stories that may have been influenced by 1984 overall. I did like the ending a lot, but throughout the whole book, I was just so bored. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Orwell wrote it pretty much to bring his commentary on like communism and politics and whatever. So a lot of it is about that, which is fine, but I don't love political theory and learning about it, you know. Most of me wishes it was written in first person because that would have led me to care about the characters more, but throughout I just felt pretty disconnected, which bothered me a lot. It also just felt pretty disorganized, and I don't know, I had to skim like a bunch of sections because I just could not care about it, to be honest. I'm not a huge fan of his writing style, and I mean, I've had worse. I'm glad I read it. It's a classic, and I can see why. I've been told that I should read We by this guy here that I can't pronounce his name because apparently that book influenced 1984, supposedly. I don't really know, but I added it to my list, so we'll see. Ultimately, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and no, I would not read it again, even if I was going to be held at gunpoint, so. The next book I read was Our Souls at Night by Kent Haruf, I think is how you pronounce his name. And this book I bought on a whim, I think. Well, it might have been on my Goodreads list. I don't remember. But I found out about the website Thrift Books, which sells a bunch of used books and things, and I would highly recommend. I got like 4 books for $20. It was great. But I got this book from there. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, mostly because it's not something I would typically read. Like, I'm a Libra, so I appreciate a good romance, you know? But it's hard to find a good romance, and I'm not saying this is a bad one at all, because I don't think it is. It's just mostly I'm bored by them now. I don't really know what else to say about that. I just don't really like reading them anymore. It's not like one of those kissy naked people romances. Not that there's anything wrong with those, it's just this isn't one of them. Anyway, it's not something I would typically reach for, but overall I did enjoy it, and I'm glad that I read it. It's about 2 older people who's both widowed, and their neighbors. They find a companionship within each other, and it's pretty wholesome, honestly, and sweet. It was a quick read. The writing style is okay. Not very exciting, but I wanted something after the 1984 to read that was really simple, I guess. I needed a break from that. I needed something easier to read. It had an interesting and refreshing perspective, which, because it's from the perspective of, you know, 2 like elderly people, I guess you would say, and I feel like a lot of books aren't written in that perspective, so that was kind of nice, honestly. I don't have any other older people in my life. Like, both my grandparents died when I was really young, so it was just nice to have that sort of connection, I guess. The next and last book I read was Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. Oh wait, I have it right here. 5 out of 5 ASMR. Sorry. Anyway, at first I was a little nervous to read this because, don't get me wrong, I've read almost every John Green book that exists when I was younger though, you know, and since he primarily mostly reads or writes young adult, I don't really like young adult anymore that much. At least most of them that I read I just don't really care for, or I'm not interested in, but this one I loved. I thought it was really good. And since I read all of his other books, I figured I should just read this one because it's been so long since he has released a book. You know, what's interesting about the description is that it doesn't really say anything about the main character living with like OCD and mental illness, but most of the book is about that, in my opinion. It has a plot of sort of following this billionaire who disappeared and trying to find them. For me, it seemed like it wasn't really about that at all. It was more, it was about that a little bit, but like it was more about Asa, the main character, and dealing with her mental illness. And I really liked this book in that regard because it was very realistic and it shows what living with intrusive thoughts and things of that nature is really like. And most books, especially young adult, are so bad at writing about that. Like, they'll make it so everything is super happy towards the end, and you know, it's you're magically cured, or even worse, it's like they find a love interest and they're just all their fears have disappeared. It's just so stupid some books are, but this was nothing like that. And I love this book for this, because overall it's more focused on the characters than it is the plot, but I enjoyed that. I feel like a lot of books aren't like that, mostly because I think it's not easy to write a book like that and have it still be good. But this was great, and for me the plot was less interesting than hearing about Asa deal with her problems. So also don't know if I'm saying her name right. Asa, I don't know. I loved it. It was great. So John Green, you've done it again. That's it. Those are the books I read in May 2020, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to be reading more in this month or the months to follow. We'll see, because things are kind of going back to normal. Not really, but whatever normal is, I don't freaking know. But if I end up reading a lot in June, I'll make another one of these videos. If you guys really care, I'll make one. If I don't read a lot this month, I'll just make one the next month or sometime after that. I don't know. We'll see. They're fun to make, and it holds me accountable to read, and I always want to be reading more, so yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you guys are thinking about reading these books, or if you have already, and I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying safe and mentally stable at the least. If not, it's okay. It's okay. We're all in this together. Alright, I'll see you guys in the next video. Basically what this book is about is basically what this book is and they sort of just finding a companionship and a